Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Over the Cap podcast for April 20th, 2024. This is Jason Fitzgerald. You can find me on X at Jason_OTC, or you can email me, jason@overthecap.com. We are back from our little trip that we had to Disney. My daughter had a good time with her singing performance that they did. I put a video up on YouTube, which I think a couple people kind of mistakenly bumped into. It was mainly just for her and her buddies, and I guess a couple of parents, if they wanted to check it out. But I think a couple of people bumped into it, probably more than parents or whatever. But yeah, they had a good time there. I did get a couple of drinks in at Epcot. It was a little more crowded than I thought it would be. I think because the last couple of weeks were spring break, I guess probably a lot of the locals that go to Disney probably didn't go. So I think that made it a lot more crowded. Flower and Garden was pretty cool. I haven't been there in a long time for that. The drinks and food aren't as good as Food and Wine if you're somebody that goes to Disney and goes to Epcot. But the just the different things that they have there, the different topiaries and just some of the different stuff is pretty cool. So anyway, that was our little trip there. I know sometimes I'll get questions about Disney, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to email me about them or whatever, and we can go over it. Beer of the night, we've got a Southern Tier IPA, pretty standard fare. Let's get that on the little screen there. My son was hoping I could get a local thing that I guess is for his, it's really for the baseball program, but I'm sure it pretty much covers all the sports that they do in our town. But they did not have that at the store. I would have actually had to go to the brewery. That was a little far, not too far, but it was enough out of the way to where that wasn't going to happen. So Southern Tier it is for tonight. I do not anticipate this as being anywhere near as long as the podcast I did 2 weeks ago. And if it is, I'm definitely going to cut off the drinking on that one. That was a little too much there. I was a little tired then the next day from all that. But I mean, a 4-hour podcast is pretty long, but I think you can hear with my voice, it's already a little bit strained. It was a busy day today. Just a lot of stuff going on around the house. Things that we were doing here, and plus I did get my workout in, and I'm starting to build up squats again. So today was a leg day, so a little beat up from that, but we'll get through this one. So I didn't know if I really wanted to start today with the draft or the Devonta Smith contract. And I think I'll start with the Smith contract before I go off on some tangent about the draft. This one comes in. I think this will be a contract that has a lot of impact on the market. So it's a 3-year deal, $75 million contract extension. And, you can look at this contract a number of different ways. Now, first of all, the guarantee on this deal, fully guaranteed, is about $33.9. I think the total guarantee, let me look it up. I'm going to say it's like 69. So you can see it here. If you're following along on YouTube, you can see it on the screen, 69.997554 million. It's a bizarre number, right? That's a wacky number. This is one of those contracts that is very clearly negotiated, and the Eagles have done this a couple of times. They did it with Jalen Hurts, definitely. I believe there was one other team that did it. I know I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. I think it was the Chargers. Very clear that this is a deal that is basically it's basically the guarantee is based on a new money guarantee. The new money guarantee on this one works out to a clean $51 million, if I remember correctly. Let me see where I have that here. I don't know if I have that in the player summaries. I don't think I do. I definitely don't have it in the player comparison. You may as well just pull that up. I can add the other receivers in there, but maybe I'll just do that later. New guarantee, $51 million. So, I mean, that's very clear. That's where, that comes from. Let me see if I get Smith's, any other details in there on this end. Cash flows. Structure on the contract, payout schedule, Guarantee structure. We do have the new guarantee in there. I wasn't even sure. So anyway, the contract itself, I would say the value on the deal, it's pretty bullish at $25 million a year. I think that's a pretty strong number for Smith. Smith has been he's been more of a 1A than a number 1. I think that's actually pretty clear. I wouldn't put him in the 2 category, but, he's a 1A. I don't think that he is proven at this point in time to be a number 1. And the Eagles clearly paid him as if he is a number 1. This on an annual value basis, this really only falls behind one player, and that's Cooper Kupp. So let me pull up the numbers again there. I won't do the player comp at the moment. Let's just do the wide receivers. So while we do have these bogus numbers for Tyreek Hill at 30 and Devonta Adams for 28, legitimately we've got Cooper Kupp at 26.7. And then really next you have Devonta Smith at 25 because A.J. Brown's 25 is inflated 25. They got to that $25 million number based on a bloated salary in year 4 that he'll never earn. If you look at the 3-year cash on here, which is the value of the deal, he's only trailing Kupp. This matches Tyreek Hill, and that's a deal that was signed just 2 years ago. $3 million more than DJ Metcalf and Deebo Samuel, which are longer term deals. $5 million more than Michael Pittman. About $5 million more than Calvin Ridley. Pretty much about the same over Terry McLaurin. And the big one here is that he's $6 million over A.J. Brown. And that's a player on the same team. So that gives you, I think, a pretty good idea as to where the Eagles kind of look at the wide receiver market and what they anticipate doing. Now, I'd say that, where I look at this and say, all right, Philadelphia is pretty bullish on the 25 for a player who's a 1A. But I think there's a couple of things that come into play there. Number one, I think it's a little bit of an overreaction to Calvin Ridley because Calvin Ridley's not a number 1 receiver either. And Calvin Ridley is significantly older. So I think that kind of played a little bit of a factor. But I think what the Eagles are kind of looking at here are all these players who are going to be up for some type of contract extensions in the next year or two, where you've got your Justin Jeffersons, and I know he's a different class of player, but, Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Waddle, CeeDee Lamb. So I think the Eagles look at this as like, okay, you know what? Let's get in at whatever number we need to get in on, because if you haggle over the numbers and you focus on where the market probably should be, which is around 20, you're not going to get a deal done. You're probably not going to get it done. So it's almost like, well, we'll do the 25, and we have him. We'll have him under contract, and that gives us a lot of leeway with what we want to do with A.J. Brown in the future. Maybe even to the point where it's, how do you want to work with him? Because A.J. Brown is not going to be on the team, at least on this contract, in 2026. So he'll be there, this year, obviously. But, next year his cap number jumps up to $26.5 million. To be 15.5 to trade or cut him, unless I'm missing something there. Then in 2026, you can see he's got this balloon salary of $30.25 million, $8.7 million to move on from him at that point, $41 million cap hit. So it's very possible that this is A.J. Brown's last season with the team. I wouldn't say that's a lock by any stretch, but it's a possibility that A.J. Brown is kind of nearing the end of his run with the Eagles. So, if he were to miss some games, or you decide you want to feature Smith more because you want to see if you can move forward without A.J. Brown on the team, that kind of stuff, if you start to feed him the ball more, those things are only going to add to his value. So that's only going to make him potentially more expensive in the future, on top of the fact that, the market dynamics are going to change. So you may as well throw a little bit of chaos into the system by just, getting in there and getting a deal done. And I think Philadelphia has really done that through the years. It doesn't always work. Now Ling Johnson's been a perfectly good player, but I do think that there was, maybe a part of them that thought like right tackles would get paid more, but everyone was just looked at that as like a left tackle contract. Brandon Brooks was jumped up pretty high with the guards, and that never materialized, and that was a contract that didn't work out for him at all. So I think this is just kind of the way that they do business. And I think that's one of the reasons why this came into play. This is a pretty bullish contract. This is more bullish than the A.J. Brown one. Now, probably part of that reason is when they traded for A.J. Brown and they did that contract, it's kind of sight unseen. Whereas this one, they know, at least I believe they know what they have with him. Some people looked at this, and a lot of times I'll look at extensions and say, well, you extend a player early and you do get a really good discount sometimes on that guarantee, because you're taking existing salary and you're folding it into the guarantee number. But as I already mentioned, this is strictly a new money guarantee is how they negotiated it, and the guarantee structure is very, very favorable to the player. So if you look at the contract notes on the site, third day of the league year in 2025, his entire 2026 salary will be guaranteed. Third day of the league year in 2026, his entire 2027 salary is guaranteed. So he's guaranteed to earn that $51 million in new money. Now, the Eagles do have some outs if they want to trade him. That's a possibility as well. But there's really not going to be, regardless of what you see with the dead money at the moment, where it's going to show you something like, for example, $12.2 million in 2026. Yeah, that's where it's at right this second. By the time we get to 2025, that number is going to skyrocket up. So realistically, there's no out in this contract other than via trade until 2028. In 2028, he has a $20 million cap number. The dead money at that point, it's going to be pretty big. Let's see. It'll be 12, 24, 34, 42, 46, 47, about 51-ish. And then you're going to back out what his... probably about $31 million. Yeah, I'm not running the numbers. I'm just doing this, just quickly looking at the prorated bonus structure here, because they wouldn't have to pick up his option. Now, the Eagles have done the standard option kind of stuff with him that they do with everybody, meaning these options are going to be due in basically September. So, there's plenty of time for them to get out of this, to trade him if that exists. But, it's one of those things where if they were to get to the end of the contract, they'd owe the cap about $36 million in dead money. My assumption is that the Eagles are probably looking at this as a deal that will run for 2 years. And then in 2028, it's either bring the salary down, extend them, whatever the case may be. I do not anticipate them looking at this and thinking that the 2028 year, as of right now, is a year that they anticipate picking up that option and, having him play that out. Cash flow wise, he gets an $18 million raise this year. He'll earn $3 million less than he was originally going to earn in 2025. So it's $15 million in extension money coming in the existing, over the existing rookie years of 2024 and 2025 in his old contract, which is a little bit on the lower side. It's not a great number. It's not a bad number. It's just there. $29 million through year one. That's okay. 51 through year two. That's a pretty good number. And then the 75 through year three. That's going to become the new floor for all these bigger receivers to get to, because he's gonna be a player that you can comp a lot of players to when it comes to negotiating extensions. You can see these funny money based salaries in there. That's an Eagles thing they do. They put salaries in there about $100 million. Makes it easier to extend the players towards the end. But they're meaningless. Percent of the contract paid, you can see it's 22.8% this year. He'll earn 36.2 of the total contract by 2025, 51.1 by 2026, about 75% through 2027, and then the full amount in 2028. New money APY, you can see that, or just the standard APY. The guarantee vesting schedule. It's pretty basic, kind of stuff. He does have escalators. I think it's in the deal, probably Pro Bowl. I don't know them off the top of my head, so we do not have those in there, but we'll get them in there. But you can look at his, if you're a premium subscriber, you can see, where his numbers were, before, signing this contract. He averaged about 1060 yards per year, 6.3 touchdowns, and then we're going to see how things play out after. I like the fact they did a 3-year deal. You get into those 5-year deals, and sometimes you end up paying more up front. Sometimes you end up doing a bigger guarantee. So I think 3 years, I think when we look at wide receivers, I think 3 years is the optimum length if you're going to extend. Now, if it's up to me, I think wide receiver is actually a great position to use the franchise tag, but I also understand it is one of the most troublesome positions when you go that route. The wide receiver is probably a player that complains in public more than almost any other player. Like a lot of times when you see contract issues with players and teams, it's pretty quiet. Wide receivers go a lot of times the extra length. You get the nonsense of, oh my God, he's not following the team on Instagram anymore. It's like, do I really have to listen to this like with Brandon Ayuk right now? It's like, this is exactly what Deebo Samuel did. Oh my God, he's so mad at the 49ers. Month later, 2 months later, signs an extension, and I got to hear about how, the bridge has been rebuilt, or, the fence has been mended. Whatever nonsense somebody sent in a text, why don't you say that? And it's like, it's all nonsense. But, you get on TV, you start complaining about your contract. You get on a podcast, start complaining about your contract. So I can kind of understand why teams sometimes don't go that route with the wide receivers, even though it probably makes more sense a lot of times than the extensions. But if you're going to do the extensions, do the 3-year ones, and then, just kind of move on. I think is the right way to do it. A lot of people ask me about how do the Eagles do it. If you look at Smith's cap numbers, $8.1 million this year, $7.5 next year, $10.7 in 2026, $14.7 in 2027. Then we start jumping up to the $20 million in 2028 if he gets there. And if he gets there, you're left with about $36 million in dead money. And, the Eagles, look, they're a really smart team. They're really good front office. The Eagles have been, there's a, when I get on a lot of these teams for doing these kind of structures where, essentially what they're doing is they're building in a restructure to every one of their players, is basically what that is, right? Because you have an option and you don't have to pick up the option. You can let the salary cap number rise and reduce dead money later on. Gives you options to trade the player while also having the low salary cap numbers. So there is a, if you want to call it madness, there's a method to the madness. Like, this is very different than, say, a team like the Saints. This is much more calculated. Team like the Saints is just, okay, we've got this roster. We've got too many guys with big cap hits. The only thing we can do is just restructure everybody and run it back again. There's more. There's more thought that goes into the way the Eagles are structuring these contracts and structuring these deals and structuring the entire roster. But there's a couple things. I mean, they've been bailed out. The biggest bailout they got was Carson Wentz. I thought that the Eagles were going to have to do a modification on his contract so they could June 1 him. I thought they were going to have to prepay his guaranteed salary as a signing bonus so they could June 1 him in the year they traded him. And instead they found a sucker to trade for him. And the way you gotta give the Eagles credit, because the way they dug in and found somebody that needed a quarterback, and quite frankly, as a cheap owner that looked at it like, oh, well, the Eagles already paid a lot of his contract, like, great to, that's a great pickup for us. They were able to maximize their value in what they got for him compared to a team like the Rams, who just got completely fed up with Jared Goff for, again, whatever reason. Benched him for like a nobody in the playoffs and pretty much made it well known we want nothing to do with him anymore. And he's gone into Detroit and had a very nice, productive career. Carson Wentz went nowhere. He's now a backup, I think, on the Rams, right? It's pretty ironic if that's where he's at. I don't even remember if he was on that team this year, last year. That may have been last year he was on the Rams. I don't even remember at this point where Carson Wentz is at. He's somewhere. But anyway, it's a good thing. They found somebody to do it. It got them off the hook for millions and millions and millions of dollars. The second thing is the Eagles have incredible relationships with agents around the league. Part of the reason they have great relationships with agents around the league are contracts like this. The Eagles, I don't think the Eagles ever sign a contract where the numbers come in and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a bargain. Like, wow, they did a bang up job getting that guy under contract. They're not looking to go down this route, which happens with other teams, where you sign a player to a deal and then 2 years later he's like, what in the world? Like, I am so grossly underpaid. They don't want to go down that route. So, the Eagles get ahead of the market, send the market into chaos, however you want to look at it. Whatever they're doing, whatever they're looking to do, the Eagles have good relationships with the agents because of the valuations they give with the players. That's just the bottom line is to what they have. So when the Eagles got in trouble years ago with the cap, it was Alshon Jeffrey. Who was the other player? Fletcher Cox was the year after that. Who was the other player? Pass rusher, right? Guy who signed with the Jets. I can't even remember who it was. But basically the Eagles went in there and they went to these guys in December. Fletcher Cox was, I think, in September the following year, but went to him and said, look, we're going to cut him. There's no way your guy is going to be on our team next year. But, we can't really cut him based on his salary cap charge right now. It's going to be hard, for us. Would you work with us on the contract to just allow us to, June 1 him? And we'll just change the structure of his deal. We'll put this bloated salary in there 2 years from now. It'll be guaranteed if we don't cut him, by the second day of the league year. So that gives us the ability to use a post-June 1 designation and split these cap charges over 2 years. Agent said, okay. Now, Jeffrey might have gotten a little bit of a salary bump. I don't believe any of the other players did. But it was a brilliant move. It was the same year I thought they were going to do it with Wentz. They didn't do it with Wentz. They did it with these other players. And again, it saved the Eagles millions and millions and millions of dollars. And now they've made this like standard practice with a lot of the deals they do. And, in the past, it wouldn't have happened. The agent's responsibility for the most part is not to help the team with their salary cap. It's to maximize the value for their players. And if you go back 20, 30 years, you had players that had no business being in the NFL. They would restructure their contracts down, but they would collect a salary even if it was for the minimum, which at the time might have been like for a veteran, $600,000 or something. They would get salary for a year, just based on the fact that they couldn't be cut because of their cap charge. The player would maybe sit on PUP all year, or wouldn't play. He would just be inactive every week, and you talk about, he's working to get back, even though he's not on a PUP list or an injured list, and that was what you did, and that's not what the Eagles were able to do here, or had to do. This was more of a situation where the Eagles went and they went to these agents and said, "Hey, look, your future is not with this player. This player is not going to be in the league anymore. And, it is what it is. You can help us, and, maybe in the future we help you." And I think that's basically what happened. So, Philadelphia has been super proactive when it comes to that. I think the other thing that the Eagles have done that's really good when it comes to these void years is they've been, and they're slipping away from this a little bit now, but they've been, I think, a little bit cautious with who they use this stuff on and how they use it. And, when you're using it with the offensive linemen, for example, there is going to be a breaking point, right, where the guys can't play anymore. But, these are players who, for the most part, aren't falling apart. They're still productive enough. You can put them out there to, field a competitive football team. So, that they've got these structures there, and they've used them not on everybody, but they've used them on the right players, I think, for the most part. And then they've been able to use the relationships with agents and players to, balance out any other issues that might exist with the salary cap. So, I think they're well ahead of most people in the league, probably almost all the teams in the league, when it comes to, I think, just being very proactive with their cap management, being very smart with it, and I think looking at it from a very big picture aspect, where you're looking at a 2-3 year period versus, the teams that are just going year by year, which is a lot of teams in the NFL do that. So I think the Eagles are just, far and above the other teams with that. Now, if Jalen Hurts busts, then, I think then they're in trouble, because Jalen Hurts' profile, going to the draft type of player, I don't think that that's going to lend itself to a trade the way that Carson Wentz did. So that would be the one that would probably come back and bite them if, something goes wrong there. But I think what they do with everybody else, and the way that they do it, I think kind of makes sense. And even if you look at some of the things where I've said, maybe they go a little overboard with some of the guys, but, they do know when the end is coming. Like where I mentioned that A.J. Brown deal, like that auto restructure option is not there in the final year of that deal. Son Reddick, who got traded to the Jets, he didn't have that in the final year of his deal. So there's times where they know, like, okay, the odds are, probably against this guy being on the team at this point. Odds are against us wanting to extend him, age or whatever else. And, they build the contracts that way. And so, you can kind of look at some of these valuations that are pretty bullish, a little high up there. And I think you can get away with it because of everything else that comes into play. But that's the Smith thing, and that's just some thoughts on the Eagles and just the way that they do business. And where, how, why they're ahead of the curve. Next thing I want to go over here, I don't think there's really anything else from this week other than the draft. Let me just pull up. Let me just see if there was anything. Whoops. Let's see here. No. So I didn't have anything since the last podcast. Not surprising. I was away. So I had worked on something with the draft, and hopefully it'll be posted around the same time this podcast goes up. I just didn't get a chance today. I pretty much had it done, but there's a couple tweaks I want to make to a couple different parts of it, and but I didn't get a chance to finish that. But there were a couple things that came out this week with the draft, just on Twitter, just reading stuff, and the one that really kind of rubbed me the wrong way was Trent Baalke from the Jaguars. Made a comment that I'm sure was a snide remark about analytics. And it was like, yeah, if we hired any analytics person, it's kind of funny since, Tony Khan works there, owner's son, who's very heavy in analytics. But, basically it was like, if we hire anyone, for analytics, all they're going to tell us is never trade up. And that's it. You never trade up. And it's like that is, first of all, the framing of it is terrible. It just gets into this, which makes no sense, where you get into this us versus them mentality. Like, I'm a football guy. Like, that doesn't make sense. I don't need an analytics guy to tell me. I know that I need to trade up. I know that when I traded up to get player X, he was a star. But you totally discount the 15 other times, maybe even the 3 times you did it. You traded up for player Y and he wasn't. But analytics doesn't say never trade up. What analytics tells you is that the draft charts you use in the NFL are screwed up. I don't care what chart you want to use. You can use what Brad and I did. You could use what Pro Football Focus has done. You could use some of the stuff Sumer's worked on. You can go to the Harvard charts, whatever you want to do. Everything is screwed up when you go back to that Jimmy Johnson chart. Everything is screwed up when you go to Rich Hill's chart, which it's not. That's a chart based on what the league does. Which is like a modification to where they admit the Jimmy Johnson chart is a little too bullish on a couple of picks. So we're going to modify it somewhat to come up with our chart. To come up with our new valuations. And he's put together something that really does a very good job of identifying, what the values actually are in most of these trade ups. And that's the problem. The problem is not trading up. You have to take risks in the NFL. All right. But the risks have to have a payoff to them. And when you get into these charts where you're moving up 5 spots and giving up a future first round pick, like you got to scratch your head. Or even if you're moving up 5 spots and you're giving up your number 2 this year, it's like, what are you gaining by moving up those 5 spots? And it's the thing that drives me crazy. And this comes from the fans, because been all over the Jets for some of these trades they've made. Moving up in the first round or early in the second round for, quite frankly, no reason. But, other trades as well. Like usually we do a thing. I don't think I did it last year, but, you evaluate those first and second round trades and, see how good or how bad those trades are. And, the thing that drives me nuts with the feedback you get on it, which most of the time sounds something like stick to the numbers, nerd, or I trust my general manager because he knows football, not Moneyball, that kind of nonsense. And it's like, you go through these things and you listen to that and it's like, okay, fine. Every general manager in the NFL knows a lot more about identifying football talent than I do. Absolutely. 100%. But if they are that good at identifying talent, why in the world can't they identify talent with a second-round pick? Why can't they identify talent in the fourth round? Why are we throwing these picks away to move up 5 spots, 10 spots? What makes my general manager magic to where he moves up to pick somebody at like number 16 that 15 other teams missed? That they didn't see it. My guy saw it. But at the same time, well, they can't really see anything in the fourth round, or the third round, or the second round. They'll just give those picks away because they got to move up because this guy is that good. And they'll tell you, when you see him in the summer, you'll say, he's that good. That's just funny. That's a funny kind of statement. But the problem is that the charts themselves are messed up. You can't justify the cost of trading up for almost anybody. The only one that you can justify the cost on is, the quarterback. And that's the reason why when we built the trade, the calculators, it was more along the lines of, different ways you can look at this. So, for example, I'll throw in the Patriots here. I'll throw in a team like the Broncos. All right. So, let's say that in a traditional sense, let's see, what do we want to trade here? We'll trade that. Broncos will give them the 12. Let's say that they want what would the Broncos have to give up? Probably their third this year, first the following year. All right, let's just say that's what they had to give up. So this would be a first round pick this year, a third round pick this year, a first round, and a second rounder in 2025. That's a blow-away trade for the Patriots. Basically, that's like picking up the 4th overall pick in the draft, for making this trade. So, but one of the things that you can do, with this is you factor in the salaries on these positions. So, for example, if we throw a quarterback in, even though the points are in there, with this, your expected return on that is about $41 million in value. Now, for the other ones, we'll just throw in blind positions because we don't know what they would be. So let's say they draft a wide receiver. Say they draft a interior defensive lineman. Let's say the following year they draft a left tackle. It's probably a good one. There's left tackle. And then finally, let's say edge rusher. And you can actually see here, based on the fact that the quarterback value is so important, that even though the points are very different on our chart, 2,443 is what the Patriots give to the Broncos, and the Broncos are giving back 4,682. Because the value of the quarterback is so high, we can justify a trade-up, even for a package like that, provided that there's not another quarterback that, say, the Patriots are going to take. So, you can look at all these different things. Now, there are different scenarios where you get that pick the next year. Now, we're not devaluing this by a full round, but, it's being devalued. There's a chance that this number could be much higher, but in any sense, when you start getting into positional values and kind of taking the draft slot values and converting those into an expected salary return, you can say, okay, there is a logic to trading up. But what if we change the position? So if we're not trading up for a quarterback, say we're trading up for a wide receiver, and in this case, let's take the 25 second off the board. Now we're back to a slaughter in the favor of the Patriots, because your expected return on a wide receiver that you draft is a player that in today's dollars is worth about $22 million a year. And with all those other picks, they're going to bring about $31 million in value to the team, provided that they use them on, relatively stronger positions. So you can recommend trade ups by, having a trade chart that's dynamic. And that's always the thing that I've said. Your trade chart should not be static. It is stupid to have a static chart where we just say, okay, it's 3,000 points for number 2, it's 2,900 for number 3, or 3,000 points for number 1, whatever the Johnson chart is. Like, it's stupid to have a static chart, because if I was going to go to free agency and I was going to negotiate with a quarterback and a left tackle, and they were my top free agents on the board, okay, would the left tackle's salary be anywhere near the quarterback salary? No. And that gives you an importance of position. That gives you the variable that you need to use to make your charts dynamic. Because a quarterback at number 1 is far more valuable than any other position at number 1. That quarterback, if my number 1 pick on average is worth 3,000 points, a quarterback at number 1 is probably worth like 7,500 points. So that's the way you have to do these things. Now, when you're the team that's trading down, it's blind. So you can have some strategies, you can have some ideas, and I would just say, if you stick to a philosophy, premium positions, you can do kind of what I did here, throwing in wide receiver, interior defensive line, left tackle, or edge. And, that can give you an idea as to what those returns would be, because those salaries are kind of all in the same ballpark. But that's the way you need to be evaluating your draft trades. And you can use any charts you want. It doesn't have to be the chart for me and Brad. It could be anybody's chart, but you have to make it dynamic, and you have to have a logic for why you value one player over another, and how much you're willing to give up to get that player. You have to have some kind of understanding. And just to say that the analytics would tell me never trade up, it's like, no, they're going to tell you to just actually work out a trade that's fair. Years ago, was it the Dolphins? What did they trade for Deion Jordan? I think that was a 3rd pick from the Raiders. Let's see. What year was that? 2013 draft. It was a terrible draft. Go Wikipedia. All right, let me see. Deion Jordan. Here we go. It was a 1st and a 2nd. So actually that's better than I thought. Let's see if I can get a 1st and a 2nd. Let me change team here. Yeah, Dolphins are going to be lower on the board. Who picks? I don't don't even know. I should know the draft order off the top of my head, but let's just see. Whoops. Went to the draft notes. Who picks 13th this year? Coincidentally, the Raiders. All right. Let's take a look. If I throw in Team B as the Raiders, see if I can mimic that trade. Raiders. They include a 1 and a 2. And you're going to pick an edge with that pick, and we'll throw in, ended up being corner. I don't remember what their second pick was, but let's just throw in a premium position. And it's a very fair trade. And, this was a trade that, for the most part, was because of where Miami started from and where they moved up to. Like I said, it was 13, right? 1342. 12. Close enough. So we have 1344. Close enough. It was a trade that, because it didn't involve a quarterback and it was in a draft that most considered pretty poor, it was considered kind of a low return, for the Raiders. But this was an example. Now, the Raiders, I'm not going to say the Raiders are probably thinking anything outside of the fact that they probably weren't in love with any of the players in the draft, and their salary cap was still a mess, and they're probably budget constrained, and they probably saw far more value in getting 2 players with the 13 and or 12 and the 42 versus paying up for the number 3 overall, just in terms of salary. And when push came to shove, I think it was almost like, well, it is in our best interest to trade down, even if the return sucks compared to every traditional trade chart that there is. So, to me, that's a trade at the top of the draft that, you can justify. You can debate it for both sides. Now, everybody ends up being a bust, I believe, in that trade. Deion Jordan was a bust. Raiders chose that cornerback, right? He was a bust. DJ Hayden, but he was probably better than Deion Jordan. Who did they get? Well, I couldn't even remember much about Watson. But that trade makes sense. The problem is when you look at the numbers and you look at these prior trades, basically these teams that trade up in the first round only win the trades maybe 25% of the time. I'm not going to look up the actual numbers right now. We have them in our book, at least for that period of time. Maybe things have changed a little bit. I doubt they would have changed too much. I would say as a rule of thumb, the team that trades up wins 25% of the time, 20 to 25% of the time. Probably about 25 to 30% of the time it's a push. You traded up, would have been just fine sticking where you were. Team traded down, probably would have been just fine sticking where they were. And then the rest of the time, it's a win for the team that trades down. So you're only coming up with a scenario like 20, 25% of the time where you win. Now, some people probably look at that and go, well, you're saying by winning that they got some players that contribute late in the draft, but, they're not really difference makers. Even if you just say best player found in the trade, you're winning for the team trading up is probably in the 30s somewhere. And it's just simply because if we look at first round talent, there's not a big gap between, say, a player that you draft at number 8 and a player you draft at number 15. There's just a lot of talent that's available in the draft. And, while you're improving your odds, by moving up to number 8, when you're including like a second round pick, and more, For some of these trades, you are, you're giving up potential for a quality player. So you're giving the team that you're trading down with, you're giving them 2 shots to find a quality player. Because you're giving them a reasonable opportunity in that second round, in that third round, in that fourth round of finding someone who, ends up being a starter. Maybe ends up being a Pro Bowler. And you're doing that just to move a couple of spots up. But, again, there's nothing here that is telling you, or that's telling someone, the analytics say, never trade. If anything, it's just saying, let's debate it, let's talk about it, and, do your job. If Howie Roseman can get a first-round pick, or whatever he got for Carson Wentz, don't wait until draft day. Let's work on this, and let's get creative. Let's come up with reasonable ways to move up. If I want to move up to here, let's say this is going to be for a quarterback or, whatever. However you want to do it. Teams trade up all the time, even if it's non-quarterback. You come up with unique ways to do it. All right, so I'm going to give you a 2. All right, but you're going to give me your 3. To kind of try to balance things out. A little bit. That's kind of, where things should be. When it comes to it, let's see. Right now my things are based on the annual values versus points. But, it's... That's kind of the stuff that you should be looking at. You get a 4 back, let's say, instead of a 3, you get a 4. Where you get into the category of pick swapping. There's different ways you can do it. And I understand the optics of it sometimes aren't great. But, there's probably justifications where if somebody's giving you a 2, you can get a 3 back. And you don't get probably as much criticism on something like that, even though, by giving up a 3, if you're a bad team, it's almost like getting a high number 2. A low number 2. But, because it's a third, most people just kind of pay out, well, yeah, they had to give a third, but they got a second. So they moved up significantly. But, excuse me. That's the kind of creativity that you should be looking at doing, not just blindly saying, well, the last 5 teams that went, number 3 overall had to give up a first-round pick the next year and a second-round pick this year and a third-round pick the next year. And, that's just the way it's done. And that we believe in our process. It's really good. It's really great. We put a lot of effort into evaluating these first round players, and we know this guy's great, and we're just going to go up. We're going to go up and get him. We really feel confident going up and getting him. Do some work. The first round should be the easiest round. Not the most difficult round. That comes later on. But that's what the analytics should be telling you, is try to work creatively if you really like someone and need to move up for them. And not just blindly say, no, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. It's don't do it at that price. Don't do it at that cost. You've got to come up with a different way. And, if the team is desperate enough to trade, like the Raiders were all those years ago, they'll probably come around and do a trade. Because it's in their best interest. Because they don't want to take a player there. Or they don't care for it. They need extra talent. They need more players. So anyway, some of the stuff that I was looking at, and these are updates of stuff that we do every year. So this one here, this is just some Excel files where I was just putting the charts together. What we looked at here on the x-axis is the average first round salary cap benefit. So we took every position in the league and said, all right, what is the cost of the draft pick who is number 16 this year, which is, I think, going to be about $4.1 million, a little under that per year. And let's go with the assumption that he's going to be at least the 10th best player in the league. What salary cap benefit do we get by having a player that we pay $4.1 million to, $4 million, whatever it is? Because, the numbers for the rookies are static. It doesn't matter what position they play. Like if I was signing a starting quarterback, he's going to cost me a lot more than a starting running back, but in the draft, they both cost the same if I draft them in the same slot. So let's say he's a top 10 player. What benefit do I get? So that's the x-axis. The y-axis looks at the last 5 years of data and the top 20 players every year. So that's going to double count some players, right? Because there's players in and out, and there's some positions where players stick in there. And we're going to look at those top 20 players by salary at every position and say how many players were available in free agency. Now, by available in free agency, I mean that they could have tested the market, like a Geno Smith, for example. Like he ends up back with Seattle. But, certainly at the Combine, if someone really was interested in signing him, they would have let his agent know, hey, look, we're interested in bringing your guy in. He probably wouldn't have done that early extension. So we'll consider players like that free agent acquisitions. Excuse me. And, this gives you an idea of ways that you can approach the draft and ways you can approach free agency. And it just, I think, gives another example as to why targeting certain premium positions makes a lot of sense. So you can see with quarterbacks here, right, our benefit is about $36 million if we can find the 10th best starter in the league with the 16th pick. They can argue whether you will or you won't, but that's a huge, huge, huge savings. And only a quarter of players in the top 20, and most of those are going to be towards the bottom, but only a quarter of the players in the top 20 were actually signed in free agency. So we get a huge benefit with our salary cap, at least in years 2, 3, 4, right? Year 1 is learning year, and that holds true for pretty much every position except for linebacker, running back. That's probably it. Anyone else who is that great right off the bat, that's just like an oddball talent. But, you look at this and say, quarterback, like, it's a must draft position because we don't have access to that position elsewhere. You look at wide receiver. Wide receiver, you get about almost a $20 million, about a $19 million value. Only 20% of the players are available in free agency. Left tackle, about a $12 million benefit, 23% available in free agency. Edge, where's Edge? $18 million benefit, 35% availability in free agency. Interior defensive line is almost identical. Now, one of the new positions to creep into this quadrant is right tackle. Because the salaries have really gone up recently and teams have begun to hold on to their right tackles rather than letting them test the market, you gain about $12.5 million in cap room. If you draft that right tackle, and about 32% availability in free agency. So, these are our positions that towards the top of the draft make a lot of sense because they're very hard to replace in free agency, and they give us more money to operate with if we get a really good player. And what if we miss? Well, because of the salary structures, it gives us a lot more leeway. So, in other words, a wide receiver has to be, I had looked at the numbers, but if you have a mid first round pick, that wide receiver only has to be about it's either like the 53rd or 59th best player at the position. Let's say 53rd best player at the position to justify a $4 million salary. If we look at a player like a tight end, because I know that's a logical comparison. That tight end probably has to be a top 20 player, top 15 player, to justify the salary. And you can do that for every single position. So, again, where we utilize the draft and we utilize free agency, we're trying to build the best 53-man roster that we can. And, let's say that we draft the 10th best wide receiver with this position. And, we know that gives us an extra, since we didn't have to replace him in that, about an extra $19 million a year to spend. I can go and I can buy, who were the two tight ends this year? It was Noah Fant and Dalton Schultz. And I still probably have about $8 to $10 million left over, to go and sign another player to where I can go and sign, I don't know, whoever you want to look at for that amount of money. A quality safety, a decent corner, players that do have a lot of availability in free agency. Now, if I draft a tight end, let's say he's a little bit better, so if he was the 10th best, he'd give me about $8 million in value. Let's say he's the 5th best. That probably gives you about 10 or 12 million in value. At wide receiver for that amount of money, I'm going to be able to sign Allen Lazard. Maybe I can sign a Marquise Brown. Maybe I can sign, who are some of the other wide receivers this year? Curtis Samuel. And I'm only going to have an extra $3 million left over to spend. So, you ask yourself, where are you better? The 5th best tight end in the league, a player like Curtis Samuel, I'll use that as an example, and your third option would be for $3 million. I don't know, just any low level, lower level veteran, situational player, or is it going to be the 10th best receiver in the league? Dalton Schultz and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, maybe someone like that, to round out your team. Like, which of those two groups sounds better? I would lean towards the one where I drafted the wide receiver and had extra money to spend at two positions. Even if the wide receiver is not as good, it's a better way to build my team to get the best team possible than taking the tight end, even though the tight end grades better. On whatever scales. Now, speaking of tight end, I called this an oddball position. Same with guard. So they're the only ones that don't show up in the upper left or the bottom right quadrant. And that's because they fit this weird structure, and this is something new for tight ends, to where there's very limited salary cap benefit. That's always been the case with the tight end. But teams used to let their tight ends walk. Now we're not seeing that. Only about 30% of the tight ends were free agent acquisitions. So I think, and I know I'll mention this in the article, but I think it's not because the prices are still low at the position. I think for a lot of these players who have probably not panned out over their rookie years, but have been, so-so, I think teams are no longer happy with watching those players leave and then become productive with another team. So I think they would rather extend the players, even if it's an overpayment, rather than letting them walk and excelling or just being pretty good with another football team. So I think that's what's going on with tight end. With guard, it's a little different. So the salaries have skyrocketed. So our money that we're saving on this is probably very similar to right tackle, left tackle. Or not probably, it is. The difference here is that there's high availability in free agency. At the moment, It's about 55%. So about half of the top 20 are players who are available in free agency. So I think the question you have to ask yourself with guard is, will guard follow the path as right tackle? So if you're seeing on the little chart that I have here, shooting straight down to where availability drops from 50 to about 30 over the next couple of years, or is guard going to shift back to where the salaries stop growing and free agency availability remains the same? Part of me would say it would shoot down to right tackle, but I've seen guard salaries kind of explode before, and then there's a pullback. So I don't know where that will be right now, but it's an interesting position to look at. The other positions, cornerback, linebacker, running back, safety, center, these are all positions that you can fill in free agency, and there's limited salary cap benefits for. Now, corner in a sense is a weird position as well. I think the issue that exists with corners is that teams don't look at drafting a corner anymore as a long term. I think there's been too much history of corners once they get to year 5, year 6 as falling apart. I think wide receivers also fall apart at a similar time frame, but a wide receiver can still look pretty productive even though their skills have declined, just from different ways teams use the position, being crafty and taking advantage of inexperienced players that probably don't belong on the field with you, and being able to bring in some of those targets, even though the numbers are nowhere near the same as before. Even if you're missing a couple of games a year, you can be pretty productive. Once a corner becomes bad, it's hard to hide them. I mean, you basically are only hiding those corners as long as the other team is just giving them too much respect. After that point in time, that's kind of gone. But because of that, I think there's a couple of ways to look at that position. I'll get into a little bit on that in a minute. But, I think if you look at this and say, okay, we're drafting a quarterback for 10 years, we're drafting a left tackle for 8 to 10 years, a right tackle 8 to 10 years, a wide receiver for 7, interior defensive line, edges maybe 7 to 8, something like that. I think if you go into the cornerback and you say we're drafting a corner for 5 and you're okay with that, and you're willing to invest overall in the position, I think you can probably justify still, selecting high there. But I think you have to realize that it's a short-term kind of thing. And, some of the corners are going to play well into a second contract. But I think teams are afraid of pumping that big money into them. And, it's probably the most stagnant position in the league when it comes to salary. And then you have your specialist, your kicker, fullback, punter, long snapper. I don't know how anybody justifies drafting those positions. Had a comment on Twitter come in that was, what did they say? Well, I know I'm getting a starter with my kicker if I draft him in the 7th round. There's no potential of getting a starter at other positions. And one, that's wrong. There is some potential to get a starter in the 7th round. Even the 7th round is not great. At least there's some potential, and you certainly get somebody that contributes. What in the world am I calling a kicker a starter for? They kick the ball off and they kick field goals. I can go turn on the UFL and I'm watching guys kick big field goals. I'll go sign some guy there. Why do we need to draft somebody? He's a starter. What the heck does that mean? He's a starter. Starting what? 5 snaps a game? Okay, come on. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Anyway, a couple other things to look at here. So I want to look at the average draft round. Let me just fix this here. Oops. Average draft round of your top 20 players. So again, this is a 5-year period starting in 2020. 2024 might change a little bit because, our extensions haven't come in yet. Quarterback, 1.8. Interior defensive line, 1.95. Left tackle, 2.1. Edge, 2.18. Corner, 2.43. Wide receiver, 2.48. Guard, 2.62. Right tackle, 2.84. Safety, 2.94. Linebacker, 2.96. Running back, 2.97. Tight ends, 3.5. Center, 4.4. Punter, 6.4. I don't even know how that's a thing. Kickers, 7. Fullback, 7.2. That's a limited sample. We're down to no fullbacks in the league. Long snappers, 7.8. So over 7 means undrafted players, right? I'm giving them a grade of 8. So again, this just gives you an idea that we don't need first round picks everywhere when we're building our team. And, when you see these kind of numbers where the average for the tight end is 3.5 or the average for center is 4.4, you have to ask yourself, even if you truly believe that the guy that you're drafting in the first round is the elite of the elite, I'll stop picking on tight ends for a minute. I love Nick Mangold. Nick Mangold, great for the Jets, right? So I think it's a legitimate question. Does having Nick Mangold, now that was a different league, but let's assume today, does having Nick Mangold as a first round pick, is that better than a center that ended up being a decent starter, not a Pro Bowl starter, just a decent starter, that was picked in the 4th, 5th, or 6th round? And I think that's probably a legitimate question, that you can bring up, that you should bring up, and you should ask when it comes to your team. The other thing is, as we look at these positions, you can start to get an idea as to where the players come from. Where we look at this. So, for example, if you're following along on YouTube, you can see this, but I'll just mention it otherwise. So wide receivers, for example, about 29% of the players in the top 20 on average come from the first round. 31% came from round 2. 26% came from round 3. Round 4, none. Round 5, 11%. None from round 6. None from round 7. Undrafted's about 2%. I guess I could have just looked up there. I have the numbers. So anyway, what does that tell you? Well, that tells you wide receiver is a position you have to draft in the top 3 rounds. And, even though when we looked at that chart before, and you could have made an argument that wide receiver is one of the top positions to draft in the first round, when you actually start to look at things this way, wide receiver probably becomes a position more that you want to focus on in rounds 2, rounds 3. Not against taking in round 1, but there are other positions. So, for example, a quarterback, the quarterback hit rates are 66% in round 1, 14% round 2, 5% round 3, 10% round 4. You can take a stab at a quarterback in 2, 3, 4. Probably no point in doing it thereafter. But round 1 is where you need that player to be. If you look at left tackle, similar, 61% come in the first round. About 25% come round 2, round 3, and you have 8% round 7, 2% UDFA. So that's a position that you probably want to draft in the first round. Take a flyer on a guy late in the draft. Edge rusher. Let's see, edge. Edge is 56% coming from round 1, 12% round 2, 12% round 3, 13% round 4, basically nothing thereafter. So, this is a position that it's probably a wasted pick after round 4 if you're looking for a starting quality player. But by and large, it's a position that you have to focus on in the first round. You can justify a second, third round, fourth round pick, but if you're looking for someone big, that's the time to do it. Interior defensive line, similar pattern. Maybe you can justify a little bit of those later picks, but pretty much it's a round 1 through round 3. You get to right tackle. Right tackle, we've got about 45% coming out of round 1, 20% round 2, 9% round 3, 12% UDFA. So, it's a position where round 1 is reasonable. Probably more round 2, round 3 focus, because it's not as strong as, the edge and the interior defensive line or your left tackles. And again, like left tackle, it's a position that you can throw a dart at late. You can throw a couple of darts in the UDFA process and, see what you can find. But you look at a position like safety. Safety, 25% round 1, 24% round 2, 20% round 3, 10% round 4, 11% round 5, 5% 6, 4% 7, 1% 8. So that's a position that tells me there's a lot of talent in the middle of the draft. And that talent dwindles as the draft gets late. Maybe not a position you want to use for, UDFAs. Corner, I mentioned that before, and that would be an interesting position. So corner, and this is one of the reasons why I think you can justify this as a first-round pick. 48% of the players that ended up in the top 20 were drafted in round 1. 26% came in round 2, so that's a pretty strong number. Only 9% round 3, 2% round 4, 4% round 5, and then 11% as a UDFA. So, again, this is one of those positions I think you look at and you say, I can kind of justify a first-round pick, even though I can get some players in free agency. But if I don't take them in the first 2 rounds, I probably should just be looking at free agency and taking a couple of dart throws in the UDFA process. Linebacker, really steady returns, 24% round 1, 25% round 2, 22% round 3, 10% round 4, 9% round 5, 3% round 6, 3% round 7, 4% UDFA. So why am I throwing a first round pick when, I can use a second or a third round pick, have a very high or same basic probability of getting a top 20 player there. And even if I want to defer it, I have at least a good chance in rounds 4, round 5. Tight end, 17% round 1, 19% round 2, 22% round 3, 13% 4, 15% 5. There's a 10% UDFA. So again, it's a position that I can look at throughout a lot of the draft. Running back, 29% round 1, 22 round 2, 21 round 3, 12 round 4, slim pickings in the end of the draft, and then 10% as a UDFA. Center, that's probably an interesting one. 16% round 1, 19% round 2, 7% round 3, 8% round 4, 8% round 5, 20% round 6, 2% round 7, 20% UDFA. So, this is a position that you should be holding off on until later in the draft, if anything. What else? Guard. I don't think I mentioned guard. 32% round 1, 23% round 2, 24% round 3. More limited after that. So, I think when you take into account some of those things, you're looking at, kind of round 2, round 3, as your optimum spots for doing it. So, I put together a little chart here, and I might tweak it a little bit by the time I actually put this online tomorrow. But basically where it just has a green, is a go, yellow is a maybe, red is a just don't do it. For all these different positions, think maybe I'll leave left tackle as I have it. So anyway, quarterback. Basically the only 4 positions that I think are really worth the first round pick: quarterback, left tackle, edge, and interior defensive line. And that's got to be a pass rushing interior, not a potential where we can work him into it. It has to be a guy coming out of college you look at and go, this guy can rush the passer. Not that we can teach him to rush the passer. Now, I think the other positions that you can consider, and you won't go crazy if somebody does that. I think a wide receiver, corner, right tackle, guard. I would say that you don't want to trade up for any of those positions. I think the other 4 positions are positions you can start to justify trade ups on. But, depending on the quality of the players in the draft and everything else, I think you can make an argument for those other 4 positions. I think there's more optimal times to draft those players, but, not every draft is going to be the same. But the reason I'd really focus on these 4 positions, so quarterback is a position that I can lock in. Left tackle is a position I can lock in, right? There's only one left tackle, one quarterback. And I already understand you're if you think you have a quarterback, even if he's not elite, you're not going to get another guy. I think it's stupid, but that's the realism of the NFL. But, you have 2 players that primarily are going to rush the passer. And most teams, the way they break their rotations up, really you're going to have 3 guys that rush the passer. And unless the guy is a superstar, you're probably not going to extend him. He's probably going to leave your team in free agency. So if he's going to leave your team in free agency, you want to have somebody ready to play. Someone that's probably in the second year of the contract. And even when you have a star, once teams start to plan for it, you start to realize, our pass rush can be compromised when they work a game plan out against this particular player. Or if that player starts to get hurt, and then you end up being like the Chargers, where you go and you trade for Khalil Mack. Why do that if you can just be proactive and draft players at those positions? So, the way that I look at it is quarterback and left tackle, in theory, you could probably be set for close to a decade. Edge, and I don't know with the interior defensive line at the moment. I don't think we have enough recent history on that, but assuming it goes the way of edge, since that's the more of the profile of the player that's getting paid highly right now, they're not 8, 9, 10-year investments. They're probably closer to 7 with an 8th as a possibility. So you always kind of have a need at those positions. So I would rather be filling those needs year over year if I have the quarterback and I have the left tackle, rather than starting to get into the process of justifying these other positions. But what I don't want to do at all, I never want to take a running back, tight end, linebacker, safety, center. I think everybody agrees you don't take kicker, punter, long snapper, fullback. As you get to round 2, those top positions become more of a maybe. And I think your green lights there are wide receiver, corner, right tackle, guard. And I'm even going to throw running back in there. And I'm not crazy about taking running back. But the only thing that I will say is, even though there is free agent availability at running back, I don't want those free agents. Most of them don't work out. Their guards work out in free agency. Tight ends work out in free agency. Linebackers work out in free agency. Running backs don't. They're already breaking down. So it's like it's a change of scenery, but I don't know what else you gain from it. So if you're a team that is very focused on that position, and that you look at that as a important building block for your team, I'm going to hold my nose, but I'm going to say you can justify doing it based on what the hit rates have been. And if that's just what you think, I wouldn't put that as the best strategy in the world, but I'm going to throw it in there. Round 3, wide receiver, corner becomes more iffy. Those top 4 positions I mentioned before, I think are all still okay to draft. And then you've got your green light still on right tackle, guard, running back, throw in tight end, linebacker, safety. So I think that becomes the time where you can start to focus on those other positions that get brought up in the first round sometimes. Really, you should be holding off until round 3. Round 4, you want to take a stab at a quarterback, go right ahead. You want to take a stab at edge, go ahead. You want to take a stab at a guard, that's fine. Running backs, tight ends, linebacker, safety. Again, those are the positions where maybe that's the time if you're going to, you find a starter to pair along with one of those free agents that you were able to sign. You get to round 5, and, most of those premium positions are no draft at this point. Guard, maybe, running back, maybe, you have less of a probability at this point of hitting, tight end, linebacker, safety, and this is where you start with your centers. You get to round 6, you can probably justify a tight end and the safety to some extent, but really, your center is your best green light position. Round 7, there's a couple of players that, seem to fall through the cracks at a couple positions, linebackers, left tackles, and, it's a weird thing. Like, if you look at what I have for left tackle here, it's like green light round 1, yellow round 2, yellow round 3, red 4, red 5, red 6, yellow 7, but then a red UDFA. It's really just simply because I think sometimes when you start looking at breakdowns by round, you can get an idea for positions that have certain traits that for some reason do not translate to people giving a high draft grade, but somehow they're still somewhat productive NFL players, even though they just don't fit the profiles whatsoever. And I think that's where left tackle kind of falls in there. Right tackle I have in that same spot. Left tackle UDFA history was not good, whereas the right tackle UDFA history was decent. Left tackle probably should be yellow at the UDFA because I don't. My guess is you can kind of wedge them in there. Excuse me. But other positions at round 7, your center is your big go position. But, linebackers, tight ends, running backs, you might find something there. And then when you look at your UDFAs, it's centers, kicker, punter, long snapper, fullback. Like, fill those positions, those bottom 4 especially, in the UDFA process. Go after a couple of centers. Give them a couple of bucks. Try to bring them in. Maybe you'll find something there. Maybe you can find a tight end. Maybe you can find a running back, a corner, right tackle. Guys who fell through the cracks for whatever reason that don't fit the right profiles of a draft pick but end up being productive NFL players. But, those are kind of the ways that you want to be looking at the draft, somewhat analytically. And, putting a strategy together that should really drive decision-making year over year. I just don't want to hear about, well, this running back is special, this tight end is special, this linebacker is special, this safety special. It doesn't work out. There's too many good players throughout the league, at these other spots and availability and free agency that you can't waste it when you have these couple of positions that really only hit very high in the draft, and don't have that free agent availability. But overall, our focus on the draft never should be, well, the analytics say never trade up, and the analytics say never take this position, never take that position, and it's dumb. That is not at all what it is. It's about having a measured approach to team building, and it's about different ways that you can find value in the draft and how you build your roster to have that best 53-man roster possible. Or, if you don't want to say 53, if you want to say, top 35 players or something like that, if you look at that as your biggest contributors in the league, that's what you're trying to build. You're trying to build the best group of players that you can, which I know it sounds weird, but doesn't always mean the best individual performers, that you can kind of grab. I liken it to, you're, and I know I've mentioned this before, but, building a stock portfolio, or someone's building out a mutual fund or whatever, you have your range of outcomes, scatter plot or whatever, your different range of outcomes, your expected return on investments or whatever. And you're trying to find that collection that, just hits the most. And, a lot of times that collection that hits the most, all the time, it's not going to have the riskiest plays. It's not going to have this stock is different than all the other 50 stocks that came beforehand. You're going to take a safe and measured approach to coming up with a method to get what you think is a portfolio that will consistently outperform the market, and have that potential to really do incredibly well. But, something that is just going to be consistently outperforming, versus something that is probably going to be underperforming because you focus too much on just kind of the wrong areas. So, I just think that that's something that more and more of the teams need to take into account. And, don't just dismiss everything as if it's like nothing. And, it drives me crazy. And it's like, well, if you want to end up on the unemployment line at some point in time, hey, you made a lot of money. You probably don't care. But that's what's going to happen. You'll end up there and you say, well, maybe I shouldn't have drafted that guy. Anyway, all right, let's take a look at some questions here. We'll do some Q&A. All right, let me look in the email first. Let me try and do this on my phone. Should just use my other computer, but the other day that thing went haywire. All right, let's take a look. All right. Okay, so this is from Cameron. Are the Chargers required to pick up the 2024 option bonus in Justin Herbert's contract? Could Herbert be traded on draft day and Team B be required to pay those 24 and 25 options, leaving the Chargers with $12.898 million in dead cap? Any other more realistic names you see possibly being traded during the draft? I haven't really given much thought to it, and I almost feel like that doesn't really happen too often. Those kind of trades. Let me look at Justin Herbert. Whoops. As you can see, I'm lagging a lot here. I don't know why. There we go. All right, my computer has decided it does not want to play nice with me. All right, let's see. I don't know if I have those dates on the front end. I don't even know if I have them on the back end. I would imagine that his option was already picked up. I would think it's those later ones that are more of a thing. I don't even know if I have that information in there. All right. Yeah, I don't even have those dates in there for that. That maybe I just didn't even know about them. So anyway, my assumption on this is Herbert's option was already picked up, because usually the first set of options that come in a player's contract are going to be picked up no later than 10th day of the league year. It's more along the lines where you get into years 4, year 5, year 6, maybe year 3. Probably not. where the teams will kind of defer those options until later on to try to help them with trading. But that's always been more of an Eagles thing than anything else, and a Browns, I guess, at this point. But so I don't think there is a avenue to trade him. Oh, I got to send an email. So somebody had offered me some assistance with a rental car. I won't say the name, but with a rental car. Thank you. We'd already had something planned for that week. And a lot of times we don't fly into MCO. But if we happen to, I will reach out. I have your cell phone number. All right. Alexander. Here's my question back. All right. I have a more technical question. Have you thought about doing a page for the team where we can see year by year breakdown on the same page to see when a team situation could be better, or is it too complicated with the NFL contract format? I'd have to think about that. I have an example here from a hockey website. I'd have to look at that. So this format that you see here is actually somewhat close to, we could build something like this. I don't think we have something like this. It's actually very close to a format that that I use for consulting. It's pretty close. One of these formats actually showed up on a team website. I don't know how. No, this is just UFAs. I'm just trying to see if I have anything that I can think of off the top of my head. Probably not. Oh, for the premium stuff too, just some, I know I didn't get a chance to reply to it. Just looking through these things, and it just reminds me of it. Well, I'll purge the old free agents from some of these things. A lot of times I don't purge the old free agents until after the qualifying offer date, but I do know that kind of screws with some of the contract distribution numbers. But anyway, yeah, so what you're talking about here, might be something that we can do. I don't know, where you get into the differences that teams can do. That would, some of that might be a little not really complicated, since you're just taking snapshot in time. But I can look, but that's actually pretty similar to what I do for something for consulting. So I probably would rather just keep it as a consulting thing than throwing it online. But I'd have to modify it, I guess, a little bit so it didn't match the same thing that I put together for the clients. Second question. Could you explain the guarantee? Is it always the first part, or could you split the guarantee over the year? Yeah, you can split them. So, very rarely do teams do that. So, your example here, $30 million contract, $10 million guarantee. Can you split it 3 through 3 over 3 years? You could, but I don't know what the purpose would be for a team, because if you're paying a $10 million salary in year one, well, I would only want to guarantee $3 million. That other $7 million, I'm not going to cut them. So it's functionally guaranteed at that point. So it's almost like when you're doing that kind of structure, your guarantee is bloated already. So I think that's why teams don't do that. There's a handful of teams that do something like that, but usually it's like an issue with the third-year salary. Where maybe there's a partial on the 3 and a partial on the 4. but a very small partial on the 4. And sometimes they'll have like a salary that can become guaranteed, on the 5 or something later on. All right, let's take a look here. But I think that's the main reason why people don't do that. Matt, question. Mock drafts with Bowers going earlier. Let's have shades of Pitts versus Chase in 2021. So, I don't know. Again, I think when we get into these things, you have to wait to see where the players are drafted before we start making those comparisons. And obviously that's going to happen, end of this week. But I do think that's a possibility. I mean, when you hear all the stuff coming out about the tight end, it's like, he's a perfect prospect, he can't miss. And I think with the receivers, and, when you look at some of those hit rates, I can understand that. I do think that there are teams that get a little bit of cold feet when it comes to the wide receivers. I know I picked on the wide receivers before about the the holdout stuff and the things that come with that. I don't know if there's like an overall personality trait. If there's I can't imagine that it has to do with past history, because teams just don't care, obviously, about that stuff, right? Because if they did, they wouldn't be considering drafting a tight end, number 8 or number 7 or 10 or whatever the number is. So I don't think it's that. But I think there is something with the wide receiver process that scares certain teams off to probably where they get the thought that, this receiver he's not going to work hard enough. Maybe there's too many red flags and, we would rather go in a different direction. So I think that happens with wide receivers. And I think that's probably more on a team-by-team basis than something that occurs league-wide. And my guess is some of these other positions, when you interview them, probably look like a safer pick. So I think that's probably what kind of comes into play. But, I can't say for certain. But we'll get some opinions on this stuff the next week. All right, this is the last one in the email. This is from Thomas, from Denmark. 2020 first round draft wide receivers, Lamb, Jefferson, Ayuk could be extended this offseason. Judy already got his new deal. How do you see this play out? Could it end up some sort of waiting game where last man to sign gets the best deal? So I can't say last man to sign is going to get the best deal, because if Jefferson is the first to sign, nobody's going to beat Jefferson. I don't think Lamb will, and Ayuk definitely will not. So I don't think it's going to be the last to sign gets the best deal. I think this is probably, if you go back to our salary rankings at wide receiver, I have a feeling that this goes back more towards Tyreek Hill having an annual value of $30 million a year. It's totally bogus. But, in the eyes of a player, it's a legitimate number. And it almost becomes something like, I need to beat that. Now, I don't think there's any reason for Jefferson to not beat that, even on a legitimate contract. He's that good. But, with the other players, I almost feel like the other players need Justin Jefferson to sign at 30 or 31 before some of those other players can get up to a legitimate 27, 28. So I don't think it's a situation where that particular player needs to go. But I think if I had to rank them by salary potential, I think it'd be Jefferson 1, Lamb 2, Ayuk 3. And then the teams have to decide, what is their long term. I think it's a very legitimate question for Minnesota, about Jefferson. I don't think that's an unfair question to ask, even though they've said that it's never crossed their mind. It should, depending on what you can get for him. Ayuk, it's like, can San Francisco find a trade partner? And if so, what would they give San Francisco, and then what would they give him in a contract? So, I think there's kind of a lot of things at play. But I think that my guess, and Smith definitely gives those players more ammunition, but I almost feel like this is it's a situation where you have a couple of players negotiating based on what they think Jefferson is going to get. And I don't know if teams believe that he's going to get that. Essentially very similar to how Nick Bosa just kind of blew up stuff at 34 a year. I think there's teams that look at that and say, Minnesota's not going to do that kind of deal. And I think that plays a role in all of those contracts. So, they probably need Jefferson to drop first, and then maybe they can get the other deals done. All right, let's go to Twitter. See what we've got here. Contacts are really starting to bug me. All right, a couple questions. I'm not going to bother throwing the second one up. Steven, what is your favorite football memory, or one of them? As funny as this might sound, I think the thing that always pops up is a memory of football, probably because it's really the first football game. I don't know. I don't think it's the first football game I went to. It might have been. But it is definitely the first football game I have a memory of going to, and that is the New Jersey Generals. I don't remember who they played. They gave out posters at the game. So this would have been 1984, probably 84, 83, 84. It's like 8, maybe 8, maybe 9. Depending on the year. And it was hot as could be. We were, I think we were in the lower part of the upper deck. We had tickets there. Yeah, you get tickets to those kind of games. You didn't get tickets so much to the other stuff. I think that was the year at least. Hold on a second. I think I knocked out a wire. I did. Let me plug that back in. So we went to this game. I have no idea who they played. I couldn't remember for the life of me, but everybody got a poster. I probably had that poster for years of all the different USFL teams around their USFL trophy or something like that. And I just remember so many people making paper airplanes out of these posters. They're flying them. You'd see what could actually, go through the uprights if anyone could get there. And the other thing that I remembered, my grandfather got me a pretzel. It was awful. It was as if these were either pretzels that were coming from the shopping carts that guys would walk around with in the parking lot, or these were left over from the Giants games. Jets might have been in the Meadowlands at that point. I know the Jets were definitely there in '85. So it depends on the year of the game. But then the other one I swore was, these pretzels must have been left over from like the Giants, because they were rock hard. And so the Generals were, I'm sure they were getting killed. And, even though they did have Doug Flutie and Herschel Walker. And next thing I know, people putting these pretzels on the field. at least from our section. They're tossing them like crazy. So I always remembered that. I always thought that was a cool thing. As far as like favorite football memories go, I mean, Jets clinching the playoff spot in 2009 against the Bengals. You know, that was a fun one. For me, it's all going to be Jets stuff. In mainly games I was at, Vinny Testaverde coming back to the team, even though it didn't work out. When he came back to the team in 2005 against the Buccaneers, and they had to actually call timeout because of the ovation he was getting. That was pretty impressive. That was, I think, the only game he won as a starter that year. But that was pretty impressive. Keyshawn Johnson's first touchdown he ever caught was right in front of where we were sitting. I was in college then. He spiked the ball. He was all excited. That was one. That I always remembered. With that, it was Kyle Brady fumbling the ball around the 2-yard line. This was in the Jets don't win any games at home, 1-15 Richie Kotite season. Not a favorite memory, but a memory. Nonetheless, 2004, a bunch of games through there. A lot of stuff. The Brett Favre had one spectacular game against the Cardinals. And I mean, from watching on TV, some of the Marino O'Brien games, from the late 80s or more mid 80s. Just a lot of stuff there, but a lot of things. That USFL game always sticks out, but a lot of stuff. I remember going once. My grandfather was he was a big Giants fan, and we had tickets again. I was a kid. This would have been 86, the year they won the Super Bowl, and I remember going to that game. So two of the things that stood out with that one. I know I'm going a little off tangent here, but I remember going to those games. So it's me and him. My dad didn't go. And, he got tickets from a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy at work or something like that. And probably first quarter. So the Giants this would have been the game they would have clinched the division, but I'm going to guess it was Washington had lost already. This was probably at the time where there were games on Saturday. So Washington maybe had already lost if that was their main competition. Otherwise, it would have been Philadelphia, I guess. Giants played the Cardinals. And I think it was the Cardinals. And I remember about 10 minutes into the game, there's guys sitting around us swearing left and right over whatever. My grandfather goes at one point, he's like, "Oh, come on, I got a kid here with me. I got a little kid here with me." And, he's like, "Oh, I can't believe these guys." One play later where Giants do something, he's like, "You goddamn effing son of a..." It's like, "Yeah, good job there, Pop." I'll always remember that. But the thing that I remember is after they won, and they beat up that team. It was probably like Neil Lomax at quarterback. I remember, it was a pretty raucous crowd. And I know the Giants weren't thought of that way, but man, there were people as you went down, the chance of "we want the Bears," because they wanted to play the Bears in the playoffs and beat them so bad. They didn't get an opportunity for that. But I mean, I remember people like sliding down the escalators and just chants, "We want the Bears, we want the Bears." And, that was something that stood out with me too. Jets, they'd lose a lot of their games that we would go to. But yeah, those are all good memories of, being a kid, getting to go to a couple of football games, lucky enough to do it. even if the seats weren't always great. And then when I was a little bit older and, had the opportunity to go to some of the games when the team was good. Never got to go to a playoff game. That would have been awesome. But, plenty of games through the years. The Monday Night Miracle. Just plenty of cool things. And, hopefully when Jacob's a little older, I hope he'll want to go. Like right now, like he'll say he wants to go to a football game. I just know that's money down the drain. He's just going to be like on the phone and wanting to leave. Even though like at his age, he just turned 9. I was already really big into like going to games and doing that. He loves to play, he loves to watch highlights, but not watching like full games and stuff like that. But hopefully in a couple of years, I'll like to do that because, that was pretty fun when we used to go all the time. And, it gives a good excuse to, if you can afford to go. And right now, I don't know if we could. Those tickets are, well, Jets usually stink, but, the tickets to go to the games nowadays for season tickets are ridiculously expensive. But, it's a good opportunity to where when your kids get older, they still want to do stuff with their parents or their dad or whatever. And, it makes for a good excuse for people to get together and, do something. And, tailgating and, going to the games, especially early in the year. Late in the year when the team stinks, not as good, but, it's fun. So I'm hoping that he'll like to do that and that his cousins will like to do that and that, it'll be one of those things where we can go, at least to a game a year, do the whole tailgating thing and, have a good time with that. Bookie Monster Sports. If the Jets go OT at 10, which one do you expect? I have no idea. And like I said, I never know any of the players, but I feel like even though people have not said this, I really feel like the Jets are locked into offensive tackle. Like, the age that they have at the left and the right tackle, I almost feel like they need to have someone ready to step in middle of the year and certainly ready to step in the future. And I know Joe Douglas's eyes are probably not on the future, but I can't imagine there's too many draft picks that he's going to have that are really going to contribute. That they're going to project to contribute that much right now, right off the bat. So I think that's where they have to go. Zach, will Christian McCaffrey get another top of the market deal after this one? That's a good question. I don't think so. It depends on where the market is. Like right now, the market, so he'll drop off, Kamara will drop off. Jonathan Taylor's on a bad deal at 14, bad for the Colts. Then you got Barkley at 12.6, Jacobs at 12, and then it dropped to 10. I don't know. I mean, maybe you can craft a contract to meet Jonathan Taylor's 14 a year. But I don't think so. I think teams would be wary of it, but I guess you wait and see. Titans fan from Argentina. Do you consider Will Levis being a guy in Tennessee? If so, should they go all in next 3 years of his contract? Yeah, they should go all in. I think he showed enough last year to where you can be hopeful that he could be the guy. I don't know if he will be. You've surrounded him with as much talent, I think, as you could this year. They spent a lot. They added a lot. I think what I would say is if I was in Tennessee's shoes, if things don't go well this year, or if things don't go great, you have to be open to drafting a quarterback. But, you try to maximize that window of opportunity. I mean, the other thing, this is something I've talked about in the podcast before. I think offensive coordinators have to be more open to changing the way they do things. Like, if you end up having a quarterback who's limited, you have to adjust what you're doing on offense to handle that. And, if he's cheap and they can't get another quarterback, do what you can to work around him. And that means spending, on other positions. But, I think I think for them, I think he's shown enough to where you have to put best foot forward, which they did this year. In trying to surround him with talent. But I think the next level of it probably relies on coaching, to where if he's not the guy, you have to have the coaching to be able to work around that as best as possible. And from a general manager perspective, be open to bring in a quarterback next year. David O'Shea, based on mock drafts, which veterans will likely be cut June 1? I haven't really paid enough attention to those things. I don't think there's... So, if you look at the cap room right now, I don't know, my computer's slow today. Like the Buccaneers, the Jets, the Seahawks, Giants, Bills, maybe Dolphins, maybe Falcons. These are teams that probably need to make moves to handle some of the stuff they have coming up in the draft. So I think those are the teams you probably look at. Now, some of them have money coming up. Like the Dolphins obviously have money coming from Xavier Howard after June 1, so they don't have to actually do anything. I don't know if the Bucks have anyone that's a June 1. I don't think the Jets do. Anyway, those are some of the teams you look at, but I don't think in this day and age, I don't think anybody really, I don't think anybody really focuses, unless you're a post-June 1 designation, I don't think anyone really looks at it like, I need to cut somebody on June 1st anymore. I think that is kind of a thing of the past. Jason says, could the Jets draft a developmental quarterback and put Zach Wilson on the practice squad? So, if the Jets didn't draft a left tackle, I'd actually say they should draft a quarterback if there's one they can get. I mean, this Rodgers thing feels like a one and done. This is starting to feel more like Phillip Rivers in Indianapolis. I'm hoping Rodgers dials back into football very soon. Maybe it's the injury from last year and he got so much, sidetracked with the Pat McAfee stuff and everything else. But Rodgers at this point feels like he is just ready to go into some type of political realm, whatever that might be. Look, he says some crazy stuff. I don't care. People have a right to say whatever they want to say. All right. Some of the stuff he says is kind of lunacy, but, whatever. I want him to play well with the Jets. This is not something that went on in Green Bay, or at least it was hidden, if it did. This is really something that probably didn't exist. I look back at Aaron Rodgers. When he hosted Jeopardy, even NFL Twitter was like, "Oh my God, he's so good. This could be his calling, to be the host of Jeopardy." I don't know if that emboldened Aaron Rodgers to start going on all these crusades about whatever. But he seems far removed from football. And I don't know. I'm assuming once training camp hits, once the first games hit, like it'll be like Favre, where they dial in on football again. But I almost feel like he's got one foot in, 1 foot out. So they should certainly consider it. There's no option to putting Zach Wilson on the practice squad. The minute they cut Zach Wilson, he's going to leave. There is no way Zach Wilson is going to want to be on the Jets this year. None. He's not a good quarterback, but I'm sure in his mind, he hasn't been given the right opportunities by the Jets. So he's going to look at this like, I need a change of scenery. And they do. They need a change. He needs a change of scenery. The Jets need to release him if if they can't find a trade partner, and my guess is they will not, they probably need to just release him and get whatever offset money, deal with the fact that you drafted, you made a terrible pick, and just go from there. Brian, if the Saints moved on from their GM, how long would it take for the next GM to make the situation more normal? I think the Saints are a long ways off. It's not just the salary cap thing. Excuse me. And the worst team in the league next year, too. It won't be 75 over. But, you just look at these numbers here again. So I'm in 2025. And you're just looking to see what you save. Like Taysom Hill, you only save 4.6 by cutting him. You lose money cutting Cam Jordan. You don't really save. Ryan Ramczyk, I got to look up on his contract. You don't save anything with Derek Carr. You don't save anything cutting Demario Davis. You don't save anything cutting Eric McCoy. Now, I'm not saying these players should be cut. You don't save anything Tyrann Mathieu. You don't save anything Carl Granderson. The point is, again, as you look through this, the only players that you have options to cut are Alvin Kamara, Marshawn Lattimore, and that's it. Again, it's going to be depending on where the salary cap comes in, and it's going to be a lot higher than what I'm showing on the site. I'll change that sometime soon. You've only got 2 guys that you can really cut to save any significant money. Maybe 3 if you want to throw Taysom Hill in there and consider, $4 million in savings a lot. So you're really looking at a roster purge that has to go through 2025 and 2026. So if you get some good draft classes in there next year, maybe things will start to look more normal. But it's a project. It's the last team to be in this kind of shape would have been the Raiders of whenever McKenzie took over, 2012, whenever that was, where it's just bloated cap numbers, bloated contracts, and contracts you can't move away from in the first year that you're there. So it would probably be like 2 years to get things back to somewhat normal. Jason, would the Chargers consider trading 5 to San Francisco for a first-round pick swap, Ayuk, and a low-round pick? Yeah, I think the Chargers would consider that. So let me see if they can make that work with their cap. Where are they cap room? Oh, yeah, they have plenty of cap room this year. Yeah, they can make that work. I don't know what the Chargers' thinking is right now, but they can definitely make that work. I don't think San Francisco would do that, but they can make it work. Dreadful, when will Zach Wilson be traded or cut? I think the Jets GM head coach combo is out if they don't reach the championship game this year. If injuries derail their season early, when do you think they get fired? So I'm assuming if Zach Wilson is going to be traded, it will be during the 3rd day of this draft, and it's going to be for like a pick swap this year, like a 7th round pick swap, and the Jets will pick up like a 7th round pick or 6th round pick in 2027 or something. I think that's when it'll be. If they don't trade him, I'm going to guess he'll be cut week after the draft. I don't think the Jets are going to hold on to him for that long. It's not right for him, and it just becomes more of a distraction for the team. I don't think that both of those guys are out if they don't make the championship game. I think they have to make the playoffs The Jets feel to me like a wild card one and done. That might be enough for those guys to keep their jobs. I think Woody has low thresholds for everything. I don't know. If injuries derail the season early, excuse me. Sorry, I'm getting tired. I think if this is one of those years, and the Jets obviously have, they're band-aided together. If this ends up being Mike Williams is not ready to play, Tyron Smith misses the first 5 weeks, Aaron Rodgers gets hurt again or something like that, I think Salah will be out by mid-October. I think Joe Douglas would probably be gone first or second week of December, or the first day, right after regular season ends. Davey, can I have some money? You've asked that before. The answer still is no. Oliver, how should the Panthers attack next month's draft? Trade down. Panthers gave up a lot to move up. Again, you can justify on a quarterback. Quarterback was not good last year. He was Zach Wilson-y bad, which is not good. I think you just maneuver as best you can to maximize the amount of picks that you can get in the first 3 rounds. It doesn't have to be this year. If it means getting picks next year, get them next year. This is not, unless the quarterback really hits, it's not something you're going to fix overnight. So, I would take that approach that I want to get as much stuff as possible in the, top 90 of the draft in 24 and 25 versus trying to maximize what I get this year. Taresh, in the last pod, you spoke about how the Eagles are getting ahead of the market with extending players. If you're a player on the Eagles up for extension, wouldn't you see through their tricks? They're not really giving you as much money as you think. No, only because here's the thing, like in Smith's case, for example, even if there is a shining light down the line when you look at all these other contracts, would you rather have an extra $18 million in your pocket this year? Or would you rather risk injury and effectiveness, everything else this year and next year, and then make out, that following year with a bigger contract? And I think that's the thing. The other thing is where we get with the Eagles getting ahead of the market, they're also projecting these players to be better than they've been for the most part. There's probably some exceptions with guys, but, for the most part, you're talking about, like, Devonta Smith is not the best wide receiver in the NFL. From an annual value perspective, he's being paid as if he's the second best receiver in the NFL. He's nowhere near that. So, I think that, that they're offering you contracts that are above your current level. I think the difference is that the Eagles are envisioning you as having a bigger role, a year from now, 2 years from now. And they've been proven right more often than not. But, I think that's really the issue, is it's a timing thing, with many of the players. And then the other thing is just that, the Eagles are projecting you to be somewhere. You're not there yet, and that's harder to do. Given how much money is spent on the Eagles offense, Hurts, A.J. Brown, Smith, Goddard, Saquon, could Brown be a trade casualty on draft night? Talking about A.J. Brown? No, I think that's next year. I think next year you look at A.J. Brown as a potential trade target. I don't think that would be this year. Because I don't think if they know Smith is necessarily there yet. So I don't think so. Maybe if you got something great back for him, but I don't think so. I think that he would be the. I think all eyes should be on him in 2025. I don't think people are thinking that way. You know, you look when the numbers came in, it's like, see, they can have both guys, and, you know, it's not going to cost that much, and Dallas can't even get one guy signed. And it's like, you know, let's see what happens next year. John, seems like the PA figures are a little different than yours. Any insight? Well, a couple things. Yeah, I've always said this. You know, the Players Association is going to have much more of a direct line to the contracts than I am. There's going to be little details that they have that we do not. You know, in regards to grievances, insurance refunds, certain monies that are not earned, like workout bonuses and stuff like that. The other thing is that at the moment, as far as I know, the Players Association is not including what's close to $1 million salary cap hold per team. Basically, every team gets a charge for workout bonuses. A little over $900,000 this year. For whatever reason, the PA is not including it. So I mean that's going to be about $1 million off per team, just based on that alone. But the other stuff is more of just like little details that they're going to have that we don't. You know, it might be an incentive that was earned that we don't know about. You know, that counts on the salary cap. You know, stuff like that. That should be a little different. But the biggest difference that I've seen right now is I'm almost positive they are not including a $1 million workout hold. So, you know, I'd say circle back in August, you know, when that happens, and let's see how off the numbers are at that point in time. Brian, how can the PA realistically make the franchise tag more painful for teams? Would you see a penalty for teams that use it but do not work out extensions by the July deadline? No, I don't think you can penalize teams. I don't think that's fair. I don't know what the answer to that would be. I think they need to revamp that system, but I mean, you're locked into the CBA, and the PA has agreed to this system for 20 years now. You know, you agreed to it in 2011, and then you agreed to it again in a CBA that's going to go another 10 years. So I don't think there's much that they can do. I don't think that when they negotiated the deal, here's the thing. The franchise tag itself impacts a limited number of players, like directly. But I don't think there was ever any thought given to the indirect impact of it, which is, you know, if we don't have a franchise tag, how much does that prop up the markets at all these different positions? Because there's no leverage, or there's limited leverage that teams have at that point in time when it comes to doing extension talks. So I don't know what the PA could really do. You know, in that case, and I don't know. You know, there's part of me that says, with the way that contracts are done, that it's almost like it should be based more on cash. But those numbers might be too high for a 1-year deal. So I don't know. It probably should. The tag probably needs to be changed. It probably should be based on some type of annual value calculation plus a percentage. But, you know, I don't know what that is. But the tag has gotten out of control. Schmitty, if a good quarterback on a rookie contract is the biggest advantage in the sport, Why don't more teams aim for higher floor player? The more sought after high ceiling player is boom bust. Take longer to reach potential. That's less surplus value. I mean that's a reasonable question, but I don't know. I don't know if there's too many, like, as we look at that position. I don't know if there's too many players legitimately that you look at and you go, this guy is a safe pick, but there's a high risk reward proposition. Like, I can't think of any year, not that this player worked out, but I can't think of any year where it would be like, okay, our debate is we take Josh Allen, who's got this cannon, but not a lot of background there. Is kind of wild, kind of reckless, or we go to Mac Jones, which is just really safe, but he's never going to throw the ball more than like 12 yards down the field or something like that. I don't feel like that's ever a debate. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think I don't think teams. I don't think anyone has gotten to the point where you can project really any position, but quarterbacks, for example, where you are finding guys who are safer picks. I mean, it doesn't really work out that way, so I don't think that's the way to go with quarterback. I think the other thing is just that, the quarterbacks, because they can play that long, you're probably better off with a higher ceiling player. Even if you're not getting that ultimate draft benefit, you're better off with Trevor Lawrence than you. Well, I don't even know what I don't know what that comp would be. You're probably better off with a Trevor Lawrence than a veteran Jared Goff. If that's your floor player. And Jared Goff's not that expensive for the Lions because Rams prepaid a lot of that contract. He's probably in the mid-20s or something like that, low 30s. No, probably not even low 30s, probably mid-20s. You're probably better off with a higher upside player most of the time, I think. Dan, prediction for 2025 salary cap numbers and how do the numbers get evaluated, predicted for future years by the league and organizations? I don't really know. League and organizations, that's going to depend on, what they do, what they look at. My guess is the 25 salary cap is going to be probably around 275-ish. I'd have to go back and look and see what I had before, but probably around that. I based everything on my projections before, and I'll do it again, based on how the TV contracts came in and the cap grew in the last set of contracts, which was 2013, 2014, and I know there's some additional revenue streams now, right? We've got Amazon Prime, we've got a couple of games on Peacock, we've got the added playoff stuff. So, there's some additional revenue streams in there as well. But, for me, it's based on past history. The league is probably going by certain accounting figures that they get. Teams just based on their own individual research as to what they're thinking. Deuce, would love to have you on our Commanders podcast to get a clearer understanding of how cap cash and guarantees work. My schedule never works out for anybody. As you can see, I'm recording this at, right now it's 12:30 in the morning, and around, I think, beer 4 or 5. I've been trying to drink very slowly tonight. But, it's, my schedule just jumps all over the place. So it's hard for me to commit to go on podcasts. I don't, I just can't schedule the stuff in there. I get so many requests for things that I have to turn down. But, you can always email me and see if we can work something out. Chad, why are your numbers in Joe Corey's the franchise tag is always slightly off? Joe Corey's are usually pretty solid, if you mean off from one another. So the franchise tag numbers that we have are going to be based on certain things that we have written. I keep different formulas than what we have online that are probably pretty close to Joel's numbers. I haven't updated them, but I keep them individually because the calculation is a little bit more complex than the basics of what we do. I think the main reason stuff ends up off on projections is just simply because it's also dependent on what the salary cap is. And we don't always know what that number is. And, last year, for a long time, I had been very close to what the actual number ended up being and then dropped it down. And I know Joel was working on a much lower cap number. So I would imagine that that's probably the biggest reason he was off. But Joel's numbers are always very, very good. I think at least. I put him at the top of that. All right, I think that does it. So much less time than last week. Still pretty long. So if anybody has any questions or whatever, let me know. I'll draft article out. Hopefully at the same time as the podcast, give or take a little bit. But I'll definitely get to it tomorrow at some point once I get done with round 2 of stuff around the house. That'll be fun. But we'll see how that works out. So anyway, thank you very much for listening. I am not sure if I will be back next week. My niece's communion is next week, so I know we are going to see them, and I don't know what time we'll be back. Probably be back in time to do a podcast, but I can't guarantee it. So unless I have a opening on Sunday or Monday, I can't guarantee it. But if not, I'll be back the following week. I don't think we have anything crazy planned. But we'll see, because my daughter also has a dance competition next week. So I'll be doing communion stuff. Megan will be dancing. And who knows? Jake will probably be playing on the PlayStation down here or something. So we'll see. Hopefully I'll be able to pop on for a bit next week to go over some of the draft trades and some of the other stuff that went on during the draft. And if not, week after, we'll go over all that stuff. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you all again soon.